All right, what's happening, y'all? It's your boy Rico from StreetScores, and today we got to dive into some interesting news about the Washington Commanders looking to add our new starting running back one this offseason. According to JP Finley, it doesn't sound like it will be Brian Robinson or Austin Ekeler. And of course, you know me, we got to dive into all of the best options that we have in free agency, via trade, and most importantly, the 2025 NFL Draft. We're going to dive into all of that and more. First of all, you already know I have a fun fact for you at the end of this video, so make sure you stay tuned for that. And this video is sponsored by WSH Sportsbook and Casino. And before we get into everything, make sure you stiff arm that like button, stiff arm the subscription button, and stiff arm the bell next to that subscription button so you get notification each and every time I release an informative and opinionated video just like this one. Make sure you stay tuned to all of the content. Really appreciate y'all for supporting the channel, pulling up to every video and everything like that. Big shouts out to y'all. And again, as I get less busy, y'all will start to get more videos, daily videos, multiple videos in a day, all type of stuff. And without further ado, man, instead of wasting even more of y'all time, let's go ahead and dive into this video, man. Let's get it. Adam. All right, so all of this started when a Commanders insider said that he does not believe Brian Robinson will be the starting running back in 2025 for the Washington Commanders. That insider was JP Finley of NBC Washington 106 The Fan. He went live on Twitter just like last week where he discussed Brian Robinson in 2025. His exact quote was, quote, "I don't believe they'll go into next year with B-Rob as their number one. But I'm just saying it's easy to be dismissive of it. But I don't necessarily agree with that because he was really good for a period of time. He got some injuries. If you recall, he was beat up. And I think what they started the year with at the running back was pretty smart with Austin Ekeler and Brian Robinson. That was a real dynamic duo," unquote. Basically, he's saying that he's a fan of Brian Robinson. He thinks Brian Robinson and Austin Ekeler are just fine. But even though he likes that duo, he still feels like the Washington Commanders will not like them enough to just assume those are your running backs 1 and 2 going into the 2025 season. Even a big fan of Brian Robinson still feels like the Commanders will do whatever it takes to walk into that 2025 season with a new starting running back, or RB1, and then I guess consequently Brian Robinson would move the running back 2, Austin Ekeler would be your running back 3. However they would do it, maybe you have a running back 1 that's your every down guy because that's how electric he is. He has home run speed and everything. Again, we're going to take a look into where we can get that in free agency, via trade, and the NFL Draft. And then I guess Austin Ekeler would be your third down back that comes in every now and then Brian Robinson will be your short yardage situation, I guess. But again, the running back 1 that we're potentially looking for right now should be able to do Austin Ekeler and Brian Robinson's jobs not only just as well as those guys, but even better. But I guess there will be times that they need to just take a risk. You don't want to put too much mileage on the guy, whoever he ends up being. And so that's when Austin Ekeler and Brian Robinson will come in, which is my point is, it sounds like we're going to bring in a guy that's good enough to do both of their jobs, even better. But the only reason that you would take him out of the game is not because Austin Ekeler is necessarily better at a particular thing or Brian Robinson. That guy just needs to get some rest. But again, this is JP Finley. I want to really emphasize that he is a big fan of Brian Robinson, even saying that the Commanders, from whatever he's hearing from inside of the building, they will do whatever it takes to go get another guy. Shouts out to Brian Manning of Commanders Wire. He said, "Could the Brian Robinson Jr. era in Washington be over after just 3 seasons? A third-round pick in the 2022 NFL Draft, Brian Robinson has played in 41 games for the Commanders, making 37 starts. In 2024, he appeared in 14 games and got off to a strong start. Unfortunately, nagging injuries cost Robinson some time, and his performance waned in the second half of the season. After rushing for over 100 yards in 2 of Washington's first 4 games, Robinson only eclipsed the century mark once more in a Week 13 win over Tennessee. He looked dominant in that game. I mean, that was the first time we've seen any sort of like breakaway speed from him. That 1 touchdown he ran to the right side, that was crazy. I was like, oh, okay, maybe Brian Robinson is starting to evolve into like a true #1 running back, and then it just pretty much disappeared after that. While Robinson dealt with injuries, the Commanders' offensive line also struggled with run blocking, and I do feel like the offensive line does deserve some blame. So Washington's running issues outside of the quarterback and Jaden Daniels do not fall on Brian Robinson or his fellow running backs solely, just 100%. But I think Brian Robinson does deserve some blame. I feel like it's a mix of both. Everybody can share the blame. But it would shock no one if the Commanders look to a loaded running back class in the 2025 NFL draft to bring in another element to their backfield. And we're going to get to the draft last. Let's just talk about, first of all, Brian Robinson, because overall grade-wise, according to Pro Football Focus, he was 28th out of all running backs in the NFL. They have like him 28th out of 47 eligible running backs that played enough snaps. And when I really want to emphasize played enough snaps, because Austin Eckler did not. We'll get to him soon. Receiving grade, he was 9th out of 47 running backs. And then running grade, which isn't, 35th out of 47 running backs is not that good. But even when you take a look at like the advanced stats, like he was 13th in rushing touchdowns, he was 25th in rushing yards, he was 23rd in yards per attempt, he was 23rd with the 2 fumbles, and it's crazy because he only had those 2 fumbles all in one game. That second game against the Eagles was the only game that he ever fumbled. He just happened to fumble twice in that game. If you just eliminated that Eagles game, he would have had a perfect season fumbles wise. And when you're just taking a look at all of his stats and where he ranks, he's pretty much just somewhere like in the middle, like in the 20s and 30s out of the entire NFL. So somewhere about like average, I guess you could say, which is why we're looking to potentially get like a game changer at the position, because average may not necessarily be good enough, especially when we just want Jaden Daniels to get some help. We'll talk about that later. And then you even have Austin Eckler, man. I mean, when you're taking a look at all of his Pro Football Focus stuff, he can't really rank in anything, because he didn't play enough snaps. I mean, he had 77 carries, only 367 rushing yards. They don't even have an overall grade, a receiving grade, or a rushing grade. He had 4.8 yards per carry, which is pretty good, but I mean, outside of that, there's really nothing you can do with it. I mean, at least receiving-wise, though, he ranked 12th out of all running backs in receiving yards with 366, and then he was 14th in forced missed tackles as a receiving running back with 13. Outside of that, there's really not much you can take away from the season that he had, which further proves my point. Literally the reason why I believe that we should be looking for a true running back one this offseason is because Eckler, I mean, first of all, he's lacking durability like we just discussed. With the fact that he missed all of those games, Pro Football Focus can't even give him a grade. And then he also doesn't have home run speed. Brian Robinson lacks that same home run speed, does not have great vision a lot of the time, and his pass protection is inconsistent. And then he's also been banged up recently. Not as banged up as Austin Eckler, but still banged up. So what are our options for gaining those things in a running back? Well, especially one where opposing defenses have to game plan against him. Like right now, Austin Eckler and Brian Robinson maybe get a few minutes in the meeting of this is how we address this, but their whole defensive game plan does not center around how do we stop Brian Robinson or Austin Eckler. It's completely all eyes and focus, time, everything spent on stopping Jaden Daniels. Can we please get that guy some help? So now let's start with free agency, which is always ugly because a running back going into his second contract, I mean, they have the shortest career lifespan out of the entire NFL, arguably in all of sports, man. I mean, with all of that mileage that comes into by the time they get to their second contract, I mean, it just doesn't sound like a great option to build for the future with Jaden Daniels. You know, bringing in a running back that can grow with Jaden Daniels. Jaden Daniels will have a year over them, you know, NFL experience wise, but if you draft a guy, he and Jaden Daniels are like neck and neck as far as, you know, we can have these guys for a certain amount of time. Again, running back career lifespans tend to end way sooner than other positions, but you know, it would still be nice to have a guy with some young legs next to Jaden Daniels, which Brian Robinson and Austin Eckler don't necessarily have as much anymore. There's a lot of mileage on those tires. I mean, Austin Eckler even said it himself. The reason that he chose to leave the Chargers and come with us was because the Chargers were trying to make him a running back one, and he literally told them, no thanks, I do not want all of those carries. I don't want all of that mileage, all of that body punishment every week and things like that. I want to go somewhere where I'm Robin to somebody's Batman. So you know he doesn't want to step up to the plate and get more carries, so we got to look elsewhere. I mean, for any really running back going into their second contract, they're going to probably be slightly slower, slightly less explosive. They probably had a few injuries. Now they're slightly less agile than they used to be, but also, most importantly, they are more than likely going to be less durable. But either way, we can take a look at some running backs right now. I mean, Raheem Mostert, who the Dolphins just released. Remember, he was balling just in 2023, like was super balling. But as of late, He only played in 13 games last year, and they technically said he only started in one of them, according to Pro Football Reference. 2023, when he balled out, had 1,010 rushing yards and 175 receiving yards. He started and played in 15 of 17 possible games. That's pretty good durability right there. And then in 2022, he played in 16 games. They say he technically started in 14 of them, and he nearly had 900 rushing yards with 891, and he had 202 receiving yards, which is the most he's had in his entire NFL career so far in a singular season. My point is, just recently, 2022, 2023, this guy was balling. If you play fantasy football, you know, you're like, yo, this Raheem Mostert guy, you know, I may not have watched a lot of tape on him, but he was going crazy in fantasy. And then 2024 was like somewhat of a down year. You know, only technically they say he played in 13 games, but with injuries and everything, he ended up only having 278 rushing yards. So he's coming off of a terrible season last year. But going back to his 2023 season, which is arguably, well, I feel like easily his best season of his career, Pro Football Focus gave him an 85.8 overall grade and a 91.1 run defense grade. I mean, that's like top 10 running back type of stuff. They feel like he was a top 10 running back in 2023, which was just 2 years ago. Do you think you can get that back out of him? Again, I'm going to keep saying it. Now, I'm not trying to say we should just keep dipping into the injury-prone older guys when it comes to different position groups that we have needs at. But I do want to keep emphasizing the fact that we got Bobby Wagner and Zach Ertz, especially Zach Ertz, who was seen as injury prone before we even signed him. A lot of people weren't even expecting him to play a half a season. We got each of those guys to give us 20 games last season. So whatever this training staff is doing, however Dan Quinn has these guys practicing, somehow he has these guys finding the fountain of youth. So if there were a team with the right training staff, physical therapy staff, medical staff, whatever we're doing, if there were a team that could take an injury-prone player and then get them back on track durability-wise, based off of what we did last year with a lot of guys, most notably Zach Ertz, I feel like you can be optimistic that we're that team that can figure it out and get them back on track, but we'll see. Again, that doesn't necessarily mean we should just go out there and sign every injury-prone, aging player going into like their second or third contract. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just giving you the glass half full reasoning behind it, but to me, I'm not a big fan of Raheem Mostert. It'd be different like if we needed like a RB2 or RB3 because we didn't already have Brian Robinson and Austin Eckler to be that RB2 and RB3 while we were looking for RB1, then maybe like a good backup rotational running back, Raheem Mostert, cool. But is he a big enough upgrade for me to consider him RB1, especially at this point in time and his age and off of the injury proneness he had last year? Nah, I'm good on that. Then you also have guys like Najee Harris from the Steelers. You have Cam Akers of the Vikings, Javonte Williams of the Broncos. Those are some free agency options right now. Now, I do want to point out the fact that I feel like neither of those names could be a huge upgrade over what we currently have, especially if you're looking at Brian Robinson as our current RB1 right now. I don't really see either of those guys being like huge upgrades, but you could argue that they would at least be minimal upgrades in some ways. I mean, like starting with Najee Harris. Shouts out to Mark Tyler over there at Hog Saving because he brings up a good point. Over his 4 years in the NFL, Harris has never missed a game and has averaged 1,365 scrimmage yards and 8.5 touchdowns per season. So at the very least, you know, I think, you know, when I look at Najee Harris, I do basically see another B-Rob, but at the same time, this guy doesn't miss games. So he's basically Brian Robinson that doesn't miss games. So there is a slight upgrade there, at least in a big way, durability-wise. Maybe nothing else necessarily upgrade, but like durability, that's pretty big. I mean, you know what I'm saying? Your best ability is your availability. And then I feel like Javonte Williams is interesting because he's had a streak of like great games for the Broncos at times, like moments of like great running back play, but he just hasn't been super consistent. But and then he also had like somewhat of a down year this past season. But at the end of the day, again, neither of those three running back options that I just gave you, and really four, including Raheem Mostert, are enough of an improvement for me to feel like it's worth signing them. Yeah, maybe like and that's still a debate to be had. Just maybe those guys are individually better than Brian Robinson, and that's still a pretty big maybe. But even so, they are not that much better to where it's worth spending money on them in free agency and then just ignoring the position in the draft and going into the 2025 season assuming that either one of those guys is your definitive RB1. I don't feel comfortable with that. Now again, if Brian Robinson didn't exist, or they felt the need to cut him, or we didn't have Austin Eckler, cool, bring either of those guys that I just named in to be a part of a running back committee, but I don't see either of those guys being like a true running back one. The only argument you can maybe make is Najee Harris because he never gets hurt, but that just sounds like a really dependable RB2 to me. Now, how about trade? The second option that we could dive into. Now, even though I would never, ever trade for a running back, I mean, maybe the Jets just annihilate the whole thing and they just do a complete rebuild. They start all the way over and sell a lot of their good players for crazy amounts of draft capital. You know, go ahead and trade us Garrett Wilson in that same trade package as well. You know, what's going on with Sauce Gardner? Him and Jaden Daniels look like best friends during the Pro Bowl coverage and everything like that. But my point is, maybe the Jets will get to the point where they're willing to even trade Breece Hall for maybe like a 6th or a 7th round pick. And that's really the only good running back that I can see looking around that could possibly be available for trade right now. Even fathom it, because a lot of other teams right now are not even considering trading their running backs. The only one that maybe the Jets. That's only if the Jets are willing to go ahead and hit that big red reset button. But again, I don't want to trade for a running back. So let's go ahead and move on to my favorite option and player. Again, I do not want to trade for a running back. And again, just to review, those free agency options that I just gave you, I'm not loving those either. I'm saying we should definitely look towards the draft for our running back one, but that's just me personally. But before we get there, y'all already know, man, this show is provided by BetUS Sportsbook and Casino. If you're looking for a new sportsbook, it should be BetUS for sure. And did y'all know that BetUS also has a casino? For all of my followers who like slots or live casino dealers, make sure y'all take advantage of the BetUS's crazy sign-up bonus deals. You can get a 200% sign-up bonus for up to $5,000 or a 250% crypto sign-up bonus for up to $5,000. Test your skills with timeless classics, explore the newest and hottest slots, and feel that crazy casino buzz with BetUS live dealer tables. Now let's take a look into some bets that we can get into directly through the BetUS website. To kind of continue going on with this whole free agency thing that we, I can't go a couple of days without talking about free agency in some way. There's so many players that we could target that are like realistic options for us. How about Chris Godwin, the wide receiver for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, that it seems like from what everybody's saying, it's quite likely that he will end up leaving the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But if you're looking on these BetUS odds right now, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are leading the odds for where Chris Godwin will end up in 2025. Basically assuming that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers will re-sign him at -300 odds, the most likely odds. But don't sleep on the Commanders for being tied for third in odds. It's the Raiders at +500 second. And then you have the Jaguars and Commanders tied for the third highest odds at +600. So if you believe the Commanders will end up going to get Chris Godwin, which I think is a pretty good option. I like Cooper Kupp as like a wide receiver 3. I like Deebo Samuel as like a wide receiver 3. I don't really want to trade for either of them. I'll just wait for their current teams to release them and then you sign them. But again, they're like wide receiver 3s to me. And especially with T. Higgins potentially getting tagged by the Bengals, we'll see what happens there. They haven't done it yet, so maybe they will not. And maybe we can still try to target him. But Chris Godwin is one of my low-key like favorite potential free agency signings that we can make, especially a receiver, because he's a true definitive dominant wide receiver too. He would be the perfect running mate to Terry McLaurin in my opinion. So if you feel like we will end up with Chris Godwin, you could put $25 down on this and you would end up winning $150 by the time the season starts and Chris Godwin is in a burgundy and gold uniform, not the dark red and whatever tan the Buccaneers got or something like that. If Chris Godwin ends up on the Commanders, by the time the season starts, you can end up turning $25 into $150, and I'm really rooting for us to get Chris Godwin. But of course, y'all always know, man, so please make sure, if you don't do nothing else, please make sure y'all gamble responsibly. And before we get back to the second half of this video, again, right now, BetUS is offering you a 200% sign-up bonus for up to $5,000 or 250% crypto sign-up bonus for up to $5,000 as well. So make sure you stay tuned for all of that. And again, make sure you always gamble responsibly. Now let's get to the second half of this video. Let's talk draft running backs. Now let's start with the first round. And again, this is my favorite option. Of course, I'm not going to even talk about Ashton Genty because he's not making it to the 29th overall pick that we have. And like I've already said before, I feel like we're more likely to trade back from the 29th overall pick in the first round to get more second round picks, or we're going to end up using that first round pick to trade for somebody else, maybe like a Myles Garrett, maybe a Garrett Wilson, who knows. But if we end up keeping that 29th overall pick, Omarion Hampton out of UNC, I would love to get him in the first round. We're going to break this down. We're going to go first round running back options, second round running back options, and third round running back options as well. I have you 4 top running backs that I'm looking at to be a true RB1 for the Commanders. Starting with, again, Omarion Hampton out of the first round. Shouts out to Scout NFL for this breakdown. Real quick, they mentioned that he was 6 foot, 220 pounds, only 21 years old. He had 1,222 yards after contact, which was number 2 out of the entire FBS last year. He has 73 missed tackles for us. He's a good pass catcher, great vision, good instincts. He's going to be a really good football player, and some Josh Jacobs, Nick Chubb to his game as well. So they're comping him to like a mix of Josh Jacobs and Nick Chubb. Now, y'all already know. I already gave y'all my comp for him and my breakdown for him in my recent, well, not even really recent, but my most recent mock draft a couple of weeks ago. I need to do another mock draft. It's been a while. It's crazy. Either way, my comp for him was 2003 Pro Bowl Deuce McAllister. I think he could be that great. And also in my mock draft, I mentioned that his overall average rank from all draft sites is 40th right now, with his highest being 10th and his lowest being 54th. It sounds like there is a realistic chance that he could be available at 29th, but you're not going to think so once we go through some of these traits, attributes, and stats. First of all, 73% of his yards last season came after contact, which again was only second behind Ashton Genty out of the entire country. He had over 1,000 yards rushing after contact each of the last 2 seasons, with a bad quarterback and a bad offense this year. He was literally the only offensive weapon and said basically like, well, I guess I'll just do it myself type of thing. And so Omarion Hampton ranked 97th percentile in yards after contact per attempt with 4.3. But that's just his contact balance and ability. This guy would easily be running back 1 in this draft if Ashton Genty didn't exist. And it's crazy just how much people aren't really talking about him because of Ashton Genty. I mean, I feel like it's honestly Ashton Genty 1, Omarion Hampton 2, and then I feel like there's a pretty serious gap, and then everybody else. And again, we're going to get to some of these other great running backs that I'm excited about that I would love for the Commanders to get, especially if we don't get Omarion Hampton. But don't get it mistaken, Omarion Hampton is in his own tier. I mean, this is a very deep, really good running back class, but Omarion Hampton is just that different. And luckily for us, the running back position still seems relatively devalued in today's NFL, especially since it's a quarterback's league right now and everybody's going to prioritize edge rusher, tackle, corner, wide receiver. So we may end up with Omarion Hampton, even as good as he is, falling to us, man. I mean, also, have y'all noticed how, again, I talked about this in my mock draft, how elite talent seem to always fall in the draft down to where like the Ravens or the Chiefs are picking? Well, now we're picking in that same range because we're one of those great teams now. How about Omarion Hampton be that guy for us, where it's like there's no way he should fall that far in the first round, but he ends up doing it anyway. I'm telling you, we're going to consistently compete for Super Bowls. We're going to consistently pick late in drafts, so we got to have elite talents that fall to us like that for absolutely no reason. It happens all of the time every year. We're looking at like, how did the Chiefs get that guy? How did the Ravens get that guy? I think we're going to turn into that team, and I think Omarion Hampton can be that for us. I mean, and I feel like he has enough breakaway speed. I mean, I'm really sitting around like when I'm watching him, what is there not to like? He definitely has enough breakaway speed, more than what we have in Brian Robinson and Austin Eckler right now. I mean, he may not necessarily be the fastest guy, but he's fast enough to finish a 60-yard touchdown run. Brian Robinson and Austin Eckler cannot do that right now. And again, we already talked about his elite contact balance. And then, I mean, I like Eckler and B-Rob through contact and after contact, but Hampton is even more of that. He's also, he has great hands and receiving threat ability, so there's like a every down ability right there. He's a true workhorse, 1,600 rushing yards, 400 yards receiving every year type of guy at the NFL level, I feel like. And then the part that made me want him the most is that he can block very well already as well. Like today, he can come in and arguably be your best blocking running back out of the entire group. So he can be on the field, and you can trust him to keep Jaden Daniels healthy when he needs to. Even though he's such a force with the ball in his hands, it's really like a waste of a play for him not to at least be an option in the passing game. But his ability to be a trustworthy blocker as a running back would make it nearly impossible to take him off of the field. I mean, he would only be off of the field, like I mentioned earlier, when he's tired as a running back 1. That's it. I mean, what else can you ask for in a running back? I mean, goal line situations, Hampton. First and 10, Hampton. Second and 4, Hampton. Third and 15, Hampton. I mean, he would immediately step in and be our best running back day one easily. And honestly, in my opinion, he would be a top 10 running back in the NFL immediately as well. I mean, shouts out to Real Analytics. They pointed out the fact that Amarian Hampton finished and appeared in their college football's fastest players list 3 times in 2024, clocking in 21 plus miles per hour 2 out of the 3 times. They're saying he's projected to run a 4.42, 4.44 per their tracking data 40 times, and he has a 98.2 in-game athleticism score. And they said that his traits are worthy of running back 1. It's just the fact that Ashton Jeanty exists. Also, he ranked, again, like I said earlier, 97th percentile in yards after contact with 4.3. He's only 21 years old. He's 6 foot 220 pounds. And over the last 2 seasons, he's averaged 24 touches per game, 150.4 yards per game, and 1.32 touchdowns per game as well, man. I'm telling you, future RB1 workhorse where you keep him on the field as long as he's not tired. Also, shouts out to @DraftRT. They bring up a good point. Y'all are sleeping on UNC running back Amarian Hampton. Elite production with 2,000 total yards and 17 total touchdowns. And they feel like he was the best blocking running back out of this entire draft with 0 pressures allowed as a blocking running back. That is insane. And as far as comps go, I mean, they've been all over the place a lot, but all of them were great players, though. Every time I've seen a comp, it's been a great player. I mean, again, we just talked about earlier how they feel like Nick Chubb and Josh Jacobs, like some blends of that. I've seen healthy Jonathan Taylor. I've seen a lot of names that we would be ecstatic to get. And again, I compare him to 2003 Deuce McAllister, but that's just a very specific comp for me. Now let's talk about the draft day 2. Let's just get into day 2, and you can kind of group these guys as like round 2, round 3, but I feel like Travion Henderson out of Ohio State is a definitive round 2 guy. Maybe he'll sneak into the late round 1, but I feel like he's more than likely going to go into the 2nd round. I mean, if we don't go running back in the 1st round, he's available with our 2nd round pick, you better sprint to the podium to get that guy. I mean, shouts out to Bobby Football. He pointed out the fact that Ohio State's Travion Henderson has wicked change of direction skills and acceleration and leads to plenty of big plays. Henderson was 10th in the country in 15-plus yard runs last season with 21, while splitting a backfield with Christian Jenkins, who we're also going to talk about because he's a great option, I believe, potentially in the 3rd round. And then when you're talking about yards after contact per carry, out of all 2025 NFL draft running backs, Travion Henderson was 3rd behind Ashton Jeanty with a 5.25, Damian Martinez with a 4.46, and then he had a 4.43. This is elite level stuff here. Also, Travion Henderson's 94.1 in-game athleticism score is powered by a 22 miles per hour max speed that they tracked, especially from his run that he had against Oregon. This guy can run, man. And Travion Henderson's, again, max speed of 22 miles per hour. 3013 pointed out the fact from Next Gen Stats that only 3 NFL ball carriers reached 22 plus miles per hour last season. That was Turpin, Brian Thomas Jr., and Jahmyr Gibbs. The only 3 NFL ball carriers to reach 22 plus mile per hour. And again, Travion Henderson was able to do that last season with Ohio State. And I can't wait to see his 40 time as well. And don't forget, as a true freshman, this guy had 1,248 rushing yards, 15 touchdowns, 312 receiving yards and 4 touchdowns receiving. So 19 total touchdowns. And again, this is he looked like a star, and then he ended up having to split the backfield responsibilities and carries and targets and all of that with Christian Jenkins. Plus, Ohio State is known for having the best receiver corps in all of college football. So there's plenty of targets to go around there with Jeremiah Smith. So they're not even running the ball as much as if he were on a team that didn't have the best receiving corps in the entire college football landscape. But also shouts out to Brett Coleman for pointing out the fact that Travion Henderson had the chip of the year out of any running back when he had to do it against 320-pound Mason Graham in this clip right here. Did y'all see what he did to Mason Graham? Arguably a top 10 player in this entire draft. 320 pounds, man. And he has great blocking and pickups and chips and all of that stuff all over his tape. It isn't just a one-time thing where he has that one moment that I just showed you. He is arguably the best blocking running back in this entire draft based on tape. Amarion has it based on stats. Again, didn't even allow a pressure last year as a blocking running back. But when you're looking at the tape, when you actually watch the all 22, I may lean towards Travion being the best blocking running back in this entire class, man. It's insane stuff. Also, shouts out to OG Fantasy Football. They said Travion Henderson has so much fantasy football potential. I agree. A great combination of big play and receiving ability, and will thrive on high value touches. Had the highest yards per carry average in the Big Ten this season with 7.1, and 48 career touchdowns in college is insane. Also, shouts out to NFL Draft Files. They said Travion Henderson has explosive big play ability that simply just can't be touched. They said that he's Jamal Charles as a prospect and a person without the fumbling issue. Now, I'll sign up for that any day. I would draft that in the first round. If you can promise me that Travion Henderson is literally Jamal Charles without the fumbling, and I guess without the injuries as well, I would trade up for him in the first round. That's insane. We need that today. We needed that last year. I would have taken him out of, a year early out of college to do that. And then also, shouts out to Joe Rico for this one. He said Travion Henderson, only 2024 running back out of all running backs in college football with 1,000 plus rushing yards, 200 plus receiving yards, and 7 plus yards per carry. And then his player comp, they said Breece Hall, who we just talked about earlier. They said similar traits: nose for the end zone, top end speed, receiving, blocking, and patience. They also compared his physicals to Breece Hall. He's 1 inch shorter and 4 pounds lighter, but we'll see what happens when he gets into an NFL gym. I feel like that's a pretty decent comp there as well. I feel like you could say maybe Breece Hall with like a slightly higher ceiling. I feel like you could argue. Then shouts out to Austin Abbott. He said Travion Henderson has more national championships than fumbles lost with 0. That's insane as well too. Ball security is huge. He said what matters most: early production, 1,560 yards as a freshman, ball security, 0 lost fumbles, 667 touches, and an efficiency of 7.1 yards per attempt in 2024, eclipsing 1,000 plus rushing yards while recording only 12 rushing attempts or less in every game this year is wildly impressive. He had to split carries with Quiston Junkins. He's the only running back in the 2025 class to hit these marks. Again, like we already said earlier, the 1,000 rushing yards, 200 receiving yards, 7 yards per carry. And they pointed out the fact that he's 5'10", 208 pounds, and only 22 years old. And then they finished up by saying he has legitimate NFL speed. I genuinely loved his pass blocking ability, and his durability is gradually improving. Played in all 16 games as well. Travion Henderson's the type of prospect you want to put your chips on. And then we have a couple of more names that maybe we could get them in the 3rd round, but maybe with as late as we pick in the 2nd round, maybe you need to take them with our 2nd round pick. I mean, we're picking so late in the 2nd round that, yeah, you may have to take these guys in the 2nd, especially if you like them as much as I do. But, just to kind of separate everybody, I see like Amarion Hampton 1st round. I see Travion Henderson as a 2nd round. We're going to talk about Quiston Junkins and Cam Scatterbo as 3rd rounders, even though, again, realistically, with how late we pick in the 2nd round, I think you probably got to pick up one of those guys in the 2nd round. So let's start with Quiston Junkins. And shouts out to Snoop's Fantasy HQ for pointing this out, because I agree. Amarion Hampton arguably needs a gap run scheme. Caleb Johnson arguably needs a zone run scheme. Quiston Junkins is a plug-and-play talent in any offensive scheme. It's still a tier and special group in that top 5 range, but when ranking prospects, I want versatility and complete skill sets. I can see the argument there. Also, same account said many have Quiston Junkins ranked outside of their top 3 or 4. He's one of the few that fits well in every run scheme. And then if you pay attention, 2022, he had 1,567 yards with 17 touchdowns in the SEC. 2023, he had 1,158 yards, 17 touchdowns. And in 2024, after transferring to Ohio State and having to split a backfield with Travion Henderson, he still managed to get 1,060 yards and 16 touchdowns. And Snoop's Fantasy HQ said, am I missing something here? If you want a guy who can do it all, that's him, a true workhorse. And then NFL Rookie Watch pointed out the fact that Quincy Junkins' footwork looks absolutely insane. Some of the clips that he's been uploading to the internet so far this offseason, and many NFL scouts believe Junkins is a first-round prospect, with some even comparing them to Alvin Kamara. And that, hey, that's my dog from Atlanta, so y'all already know I'm a big Alvin Kamara fan. Quincy Junkins ends up being Alvin Kamara. Yeah, I would take him in the first round, 29th overall as well. Junkins is currently training with Josh Hicks, who has trained several great running backs, including Ezekiel Elliott, Melvin Gordon, Leonard Fournette, and Tony Pollard. So he's getting busy. And I do feel like him transferring to Ohio State and splitting the backfield with Travion hurt both of their draft stocks for sure. I feel like Travion Henderson, if he would just by himself at Ohio State, he would be drafted higher. I feel like if Quincy Junkins stayed with Ole Miss, he probably would have been drafted higher as well. Now, I mean, granted, can't argue against the fact that he went to Ohio State and got a national championship, but draft stock wise, I feel like it would be higher if he didn't have to split carries basically in half with another great running back. We're talking about both of these guys going in the second or third round at the latest. And so, I mean, just naturally, people aren't going to put you as high on their draft boards just off of they want more proof that you can carry a load and be a true workhorse that can get all of the majority of the carries throughout a season. Also, Quincy Junkins never had more than 17 touches in a game, compared to how he had 20 plus touches 15 times in 2 years at Ole Miss. Again, transferring to Ohio State, you know, national championship wise, and, you know, being seen on the big screen, everybody sees you, and national television, bright lights and stuff. Yeah, that was cool, but production definitely took a mean step back. But also, you could argue it's an advantage because now he maybe has a little less wear and tear on him going into the draft, and maybe that raises him up some people's draft boards off of that. It also, you got to remember that, man, I don't know if y'all have seen it, but he's clean running people over all throughout his tape. Like hilarious clips like this all throughout his tape. Like, come on, dog. Like, how do you not laugh seeing something like that? How do you not want somebody like that in your backfield, man? And then even on top of that, he's not just running people over. He also has big playability as well, because he had a 70-yard touchdown run versus Notre Dame in the college football championship game. Everybody watching. Also, shouts out to Chris Nails, because he pointed out the fact that Quincy Junkins' 2025 draft profile includes elite vision, quick burst, contact balance, versatile runner, elusive moves, receiving skills, proven stats, and a durable build as well. You really can't miss with that guy. Now moving on to Cam Scatterbo, who was the definition of carrying a team on his back. I mean, he literally carried Arizona State to the college football playoffs basically single-handedly. And shouts out to Joel Morin, because he said, don't overthink Cam Scatterbo. Anybody who can break tackles like this will translate to the NFL. And he brought up so many different highlights and clips of him breaking tackles left and right. Please go look up Cam Scatterbo tape if you haven't already. That's another one that's going to have you laughing, or at least making the stank face like, golly. Shouts out to James Foster. He said Cam Scatterbo's Big 12 championship game has to be in contention for the non-Aston Genty running back performance of the year. And I'm not going to lie, I may agree with that, man. Against Iowa State in that Big 12 championship game, man, if you had to just sit down and watch one game outside of Aston Genty, out of any of these running backs, that may be the game I would tell you to watch, man. If you just have to fall back in love with the running back position while it's being devalued, that's the game that'll get you to fall back in love with running back. Also, while Aston Genty had 151 missed tackles forced during the 2024 college football season, Cam Scatterbo was second in the class with 102. The reason that the other guys had more yards after contact per carry is because they have bigger playability. See, Cam Scatterbo, he's going to break a lot of tackles, but he's not necessarily going to have that next gear to where he could break it off for like a 50, 60-yard run afterwards like the other guys do. But when we're talking about missed tackles forced, it's only Aston Genty better than Cam Scatterbo in this class. And 33rd team honestly feels like he's a modern Mike Allstott. Remember from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they feel like he's literally him right now. Maybe even with a slightly higher ceiling, to be honest. Also, just to remind you too, this guy isn't just a guy that runs people over. He had 45 plus receptions. He had 24 total touchdowns, 2,300 all-purpose yards. Again, 102 forced missed tackles is insane. And he rushed for 100 plus first downs. This guy is a first down machine. You need a first down. This is the guy that you want trying to get it for you, because he's going to break how many ever tackles it takes. And again, if you still need any convincing beyond what I just already told you on Cam Scatterbo, again, just go look at the ASU versus Iowa State game in the Big 12 championship. Again, if I had to pick pick one game out of all of these running backs that will probably be the most entertaining and crazy to watch is that one. But also, if you just needed one play, give me 13 minutes, 51 seconds left in the second quarter in that Big 12 championship between Arizona State and Iowa State. If you had to just watch one running play from Cam Scatterbo, any of these running backs, please let it be that one. Please go watch that and then come back to the comment section of this video and tell me you wouldn't be willing to draft a guy like that, man. I mean, that one play is crazy. But then he even has more insane plays. Just, I mean, like when he played against Sacramento State, now granted, that's not like the best competition, but of course, Arizona State didn't have a great team either. But he scooped an onside kick and carried half the opposing team for 20 yards into the end zone. Go check out that highlight somewhere as well, man. But he's not just some short yardage situation type of guy only. He can play every down. That's why he has true running back one potential. Again, this guy is a good receiving back. Shouts out to Dynasty Zoltan for pointing this out. Cam Scatterbo can catch and run routes too as well. Go look at his tape. He can run some routes. It's what gives him massive fantasy floor and ceiling. Third down back, I can expect to get 50+ targets per season like a James Conner, David Montgomery, Josh Jacobs, Javonte Williams type of guy. Defensive backs just have no shot against him in space. And then Dynasty Zoltan also pointed out the fact that Cam Scatterbo is his 2025 RB3. He also said that he has contact, balance, power, leg drive. 3 elite NFL unteachable traits only Aston Genty compares. Projects as a long-term NFL bell cow with T12 potential for year 1. Think James Conner, David Montgomery, and pre-ACL Javonte Williams. And then, I mean, I feel like, me personally, as a Commanders Washington football team, most importantly for this situation, Redskins fan, Cam Scatterbo is easily the closest thing to giving us what we had in John Riggins, what he used to give us back when we were winning Super Bowls. Like, out of this entire draft class, if you're looking for the next potential John Riggins specifically, it's this guy. Again, of course, I'm not disrespecting John Riggins by saying that Cam Scatterbo is guaranteed to literally be him, but I'm saying that Cam is your best shot at it if that's what you want in a running back. Cam is just 2 inches shorter and maybe like 5 pounds lighter, but literally his tape reminds you of John Riggins. Again, go look at his tape if you haven't already. But yeah, man, that's all of the running backs that I wanted to talk about. And I feel like my conclusion at the end of the day is that we picked a great draft to need a true running back one right now. So for us looking for interior defensive line, for us looking at tight end, for us looking at edge rusher, and for us looking at running back, we picked the best draft to do that. Wide receiver is the only need I feel like we have where the draft and the amount of talent that's in it that's worthy of picking doesn't necessarily match our need. But tight end, defensive tackle, edge rusher, then really the entire defensive line, and running back, we picked the best time to need one of those guys, man. So let's take advantage of that and go get one. First, second, or third round, whatever you got to do, just make sure you address it. I don't ever want Jaden Daniels leading our team and rushing ever again in the rest of his career. I love the fact that he can run, but he shouldn't be leading your team in rushing yards, man. Lamar Jackson didn't lead the Ravens in rushing yards, man. I don't ever want defenses ignoring, even having the game plan for our running backs and just focusing purely all of their time, attention, and strategy towards stopping Jaden Daniels. I want them to also think about how they got to stop our running back as well. Just like game planning against the Eagles, teams more so focus on stopping Saquon Barkley than they do on stopping Jalen Hurts. I would love it if Jaden Daniels was afforded that same grace as well. So please, let's go get him some help. Also, at the end of the day, man, I think Brian Robinson will at least stick around for his final year of his contract. I don't necessarily see us cutting him this upcoming 2025 season. But I mean, I also don't see us really cutting Austin Eckler either. But I just think that they will both move down the depth chart. In 2025, our RB1, who's still not on our roster yet, will force Brian Robinson to be our RB2 and Austin Eckler to basically be our RB3. And to go even further, I strongly feel like our running back one will be picked up in the NFL draft within the first 3 rounds. I really don't see us getting like a free agent or trading for a guy that's going to be our RB1. I definitely see it being one of these guys in the draft that we talked about today. And also, before we go, just to let you know, and I feel like this is big, I'm really excited seeing this. We're 5 days away from the NFL Combine. We're 10 days away from the franchise tag deadline, so T. Higgins, we'll got to monitor that. We're 18 days away from free agency, 61 days away from the draft. We're 81 days away from the schedule release, 100 44 days away from training camp, 166 days from preseason, and 194 days away from the 2025 regular season. I'm excited, man. It's a pretty far away, but hey, man, again, we're only 5 from the combine, 10 from the franchise tag deadline, 18 away from free agency. Things are about to get really interesting in the next few weeks, man. So make sure you stay tuned. I'm gonna have y'all updated on all of that, man. And speaking of the combine, Adam Peters, our general manager, will speak Tuesday at 12 p.m. and head coach Dan Quinn will speak Wednesday at 1 p.m. So y'all already know we're gonna super duper hyper analyze and break down every little word that they have to say to see if we can get any clues as to what we're thinking, draft, free agency, all that. You know, maybe we'll trade for Myles Garrett. I'm pretty sure some of those questions will be thrown out there. And of course, they're gonna do a great job of bobbing and weaving those questions and not giving any real information, but we're gonna try to nitpick and dive as deep as we can to try to get whatever we can from those speeches and their press conferences. So make sure you stay tuned for that as well on this channel. But yeah, man, that's the end of this video. Please get in the comment section. Let me know if you feel about everything discussed in the video. Please still follow that like button, still follow the subscription button, and still follow the bell next to that subscription button so you get notification each and every time I release informative and opinion videos just like this one. Make sure you stay tuned for more content. If you made it this far in the video, I salute you, man. That's a big salute. Really appreciate you. And as promised, I have the fact of the day. And the fact is, Chris Cooley with 429 catches from 2004 to 2012, and Jerry Smith, 421 catches from 1965 to 1977, ranked number 5 and 6 on Washington's all-time receiving list entering 2023. They are 1-2 among tight ends in club history. Just to let you know, I thought that was a pretty interesting fact right there. That was a cool one. I feel like if they would have given us that as like a trivia question, that would have been a really tough one. So I can see why they worded it as a fact instead. But either way, I really appreciate you for making this far of the video. Of course, let me know in the comment section how y'all feel about this whole situation. Do you feel like running back 1 is one of our biggest needs on the team? Do you feel like we do need somebody that's better than Brian Robinson and Austin Eckler? And then how would you go about it? Would you try to get a guy in free agency? Would you trade for a guy? Or would you wait until the draft like me, Father Marion Hampton, Travion Henderson, Cam Scatterbo, or Quista Junkins? Let me know how you feel about all of those running backs. Do you agree with my assessments and breakdowns of those guys as well? And of course, again, make sure you stay tuned because we'll probably do this for other position groups as well. We'll be like wide receiver, free agency options, trade options, draft options. So be on the lookout. I'm probably going to do more videos like this for other position groups. So stay tuned for that. Again, of course, make sure you leave a like on the way out. And remember that this video is sponsored by BetUS Sportsbook and Casino. And please make sure if you don't do nothing else, please make sure you gamble responsibly. Leave a like on the way out. I really appreciate y'all. I'm going to catch y'all later. I'm out.